The engine of my car had been cooling off for hours, and so had I. Chicago was sleeping, or at least pretending to, wrapped in that false tranquility of 5 a.m., but in the driver's seat of my Honda CR-V, there was no room for sleep. Only the cold. A cold that had settled into my bones as I watched through the windshield, the lights of room 314 at the Monarch Hotel turn on, dim, and finally go out. They had walked in together. Him. Daniel, my husband of 7 years. Wearing that navy blue blazer I bought him last September. Her, a tall silhouette with dark hair pinned up, dressed in a striking red dress that screamed in the gloom of the parking garage. They were laughing. He opened the door for her, with that gentlemanly gesture he always used for important clients. A gesture I foolishly believed he reserved only for me. They didn't kiss at the entrance. That would have been too vulgar, too obvious for a man like Daniel. They only exchanged an intimate, knowing look before disappearing behind the revolving doors. That was the moment the world, my world, split in two with a deafening silence. My phone, glued to my sweaty palm, buzzed with a soft vibration just as the first fingers of pink light scratched the sky above the Willis Tower in the distance. A text from him. "Daniel, honey, I'm sorry. It's going to be one of those nights. This damn tax closing for the Vanderbilt account has me tied to the office. Don't wait up for dinner. I'll call you in the morning. Zoxo." I read the text once, twice, 3 times. The words danced on the screen. Well polished, professional lies, worthy of the successful corporate lawyer he had become. Tied to the office, right? Only the office had a king-size bed and a view of the river. The coldness I had been accumulating all night, layer by layer like frost on a window pane, suddenly became solid, sharp, useful. It was no longer a weight, it was a weapon. My numb fingers moved with robotic precision. "Me, calm down. We are going to sign the divorce papers." The response was almost immediate. A phone call that I declined without blinking. Then another text. "Daniel, what? Not this drama again. Eleanor, you're joking, right? I'm up to my neck in work." "Me, I'm not joking. Come down now. I'm in the parking garage." There was a long, eternal pause. The screen showed Daniel is typing several times, as if he were searching for the right words to defuse a bomb whose fuse had already burned all the way down. Finally, a simple "Daniel. Where?" I didn't answer. I locked my screen and stepped out of the car. The morning air smelled of freshly brewed coffee from the corner cafe and gasoline. I leaned against the hood, crossing my arms. They weren't shaking. It surprised me. I waited. The minutes dragged on. Then the revolving door began to spin and he walked out. He was wearing the exact same clothes from last night, now wrinkled. His hair, always perfectly styled, was a mess. He searched with his gaze, confused, until his eyes locked onto mine. I saw the color drain from his face. It was an instant physical reaction. His mask of a confident attorney, of a husband in control, cracked for a second, exposing pure panic. He walked toward me slowly at first, then faster. He tried to put together a smile, a crooked, nervous smile. "Eleanor, my God, what are you doing here?" His voice sounded rough, sleep-heavy, fake. He reached out as if to hug me, but my posture, my crossed arms acting as a barrier, stopped him dead in his tracks. "What's wrong? Did you follow me? This isn't what it looks like, I swear," he mumbled, lowering his voice. His eyes darted from my face to my car, to the hotel windows, anywhere but my soul. "Oh no," I said. My voice sounded strange to me, calm, as if it belonged to another woman, a much stronger woman. I pulled the phone from my pocket. I didn't open the messages. I opened the photo gallery. The first one was from last night. The two of them walking into the hotel, his hand on her lower back, a possessive, intimate gesture. The second taken three days ago by the private investigator I had hired. Daniel and Chloe, that same woman in red, laughing on a patio by the Riverwalk, sharing a bottle of white wine, his hand over hers. I swiped the image. There were more, but the first was enough. I held the screen up to his face. I saw his eyes dilate. How he swallowed hard. His entire repertoire of excuses vanished into the cold morning air. "And this isn't what looks like either, Daniel. Is it another client? The daughter of your best client, perhaps?" Chloe Miller, 28 years old, newly hired in the tax department, very dedicated from what I hear. "Eleanor, listen to me." His voice was now a pleading rasp. He tried to grab my arm, but I yanked my hand away as if his touch burned me. No, you listen to me. I've spent the entire night here. I watched the light in your room turn off. I read your pathetic lie about working. I stopped listening to you years ago. I just didn't want to realize it. I took a deep breath. The air hurt my chest. The papers are ready. My lawyer, Miss Vance, yes, the one you recommended for the HOA dispute, has them all prepared. Your copy will be at the firm at 10. I'll be there at 11. With any luck by then, you'll have had time to shower and invent a better excuse to tell your mother why your marriage has gone to hell. You can't do this, he exploded, and his fear turned to rage. That rage of a cornered man who thought he held all the cards. It's insane. Over some stupid thing, she's just a girl. That means nothing. It's a work thing. A work thing, I repeated, and for the first time I felt the anger, the pure righteous anger begin to melt the ice in my veins. Sleeping with the daughter of your senior partner is a work thing. Using our money, the money for our future to pay for her apartment and jewelry is a work thing. Please, Daniel, do me a favor and don't treat me like an idiot right up to the very end. My voice, louder than I intended, echoed in the silence of the garage. A valet walking out of the hotel shot us a curious glance. Daniel shrank, humiliated. How do you know about the apartment? He asked, bewildered, his anger deflating instantly. A cold smile crept onto my lips. It was the first time I felt powerful in months, in years, because I am no longer the naive Eleanor you met. The one who believed coming home late was due to traffic on the Kennedy Expressway. The one who thought those business trips to Miami were just to play golf with clients. That woman froze to death in this seat last night. The one who's left, I said, opening the car door. The one who's left has been doing her homework. I got into the car and slammed the door. He stood rooted there, pale, disheveled, watching the perfect life he had built on a mountain of lies crumble at his feet. I started the engine, a healthy, decisive sound that cut through the tense silence between us. I rolled down the window just a few inches. His eyes, full of genuine fear, now met mine. At 11, Daniel at the office, don't be late. You know how much I hate it when people waste my time. And before he could articulate another lie, another plea, another attempt at manipulation, I took my foot off the brake and drove away. In the rear-view mirror, I watched him grow smaller and smaller, alone under the cold light of the Chicago dawn, still holding his phone, the evidence of his ruin glowing uselessly on the now dark screen. I didn't cry. Instead, I turned on the radio. An old Fleetwood Mac song was playing, ironically upbeat. I turned it up, and for the first time in an endless night, I took a real breath. It wasn't a sigh of relief. It was the first sharp, painful gasp of someone who had just broken the surface after nearly drowning. The battle, I knew, was only just beginning, but last night, in the suffocating stillness of that parking garage, I had fought the first and most important skirmish. I had won myself back. 3 months earlier, the breeze coming through the Florida ceiling windows of our Lincoln Park penthouse still carried a last sigh of summer. But the light wasn't the same anymore. It was a lower, more golden light that announced autumn. I, Eleanor, was leaning against the doorframe, watching the late afternoon tint the brick facades of the neighboring block amber. In my hand, a glass of white wine that had lost its chill. Behind me echoed the silence of an apartment that was too big, too quiet. "This week is going to be hell, honey," Daniel said, walking out of the bedroom. He was wearing the light blue shirt that fit him best, the one I had ironed myself that morning. He adjusted his tie knot in the hallway mirror with that quick, expert gesture he had perfected over years of appearing before judges and wealthy clients. "The Vanderbilt case is about to blow up. Late meetings, business dinners, don't wait up for me." It was the third time he had said it that week, and it was only Tuesday. I turned to him, leaning my hip against the windowsill. "Another dinner with the same client. It seems Mr. Vanderbilt prefers our company to his wife's." Daniel chuckled. A hollow professional sound. "He's a big fish, Nora. A big fish with a messy divorce and an investment portfolio that takes up half the Cayman Islands. These courtesies are just par for the course." He walked over and gave me a quick peck on the cheek. His expensive woody cologne enveloped me. For months, that scent hadn't given me the butterflies it used to. Now it just reminded me of hotel lobbies and invoices I never saw. You know how this goes. I know, I said, and it was true. I knew the theory. 7 years of marriage to a rising attorney at a prestigious Les All Street firm. Teach you the theory. What I didn't know was why the practice made my stomach tie in tighter knots every day. "And your dinner with Sarah?" he asked, picking up his leather briefcase, the one his partners gifted him when he made partner. Cankled. "She has to stay late at the gallery setting up the new exhibition." "That's a shame. Order something nice for yourself." He opened the door. "I don't know what time I'll be back." "Don't wait up." The door clicked shut softly. Silence reclaimed the apartment. I finished the warm sour wine. Business dinners. At first, when he was a junior associate, they were cold pizzas at the office. Then they became steakus downtown. Lately, they had mutated into informal events and gatherings with vague timelines. I had been understanding, even proud. My husband, the brilliant Daniel Bennett, climbing the ladder of success with determination. Until one day, looking up at that ladder from the bottom, I realized I was no longer climbing beside him. I had been left on a landing, holding the coat he shed to climb faster. A week later was my younger sister Claire's wedding, a beautiful celebration at a modernized vineyard up in Harbor Country, Michigan. Golden vines, long tables, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Daniel looked impeccable as always. The perfect suit, dancing with my mother, making the right jokes with my uncles, the perfect husband. But I, who had learned to read the slightest micro-expressions on his face over 7 years, saw the tension behind his smile. I saw how his gaze drifted every few minutes, how he discreetly but constantly checked his wristwatch. "Your better half seems to be in a rush," murmured Sarah, my older sister, stepping up beside me with 2 flutes of champagne. Hair Gaza as sharp as a huff's, followed the direction of mine. Daniel was across the patio talking to my dad, but his posture was rigid, distant. "The Vanderbilt case," I replied automatically. It was the wild card, the universal excuse. Sarah took a sip of her champagne. "That case must have more tentacles than an octopus. It's been wrapping him up since spring." She looked at me sideways. "Are you guys okay?" "Sure. Why wouldn't we be?" "I don't know. Because he seems more interested in his phone than your sister's dress. And because you have a smile painted on, that reminds me of Mom the day the dog ate Grandma's rosary." Before I could answer, Daniel approached. "Honey, I'm so sorry," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. His touch sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. "I have to go. Vanderbilt needs to sign some documents tonight. It's crazy, but it's par for the course." I finished for him with a sweetness that surprised even me. He blinked, slightly taken aback. "Exactly. I'm sorry." He kissed my cheek. "Give Claire a hug for me. Next dinner's on me." And just like that, in the middle of my sister's wedding, he vanished. I watched him walk away between the tables, waving goodbye, his other hand already pulling his phone from his pocket. Later, well past midnight, Sarah drove me home. Daniel had taken his own car. When I walked into the garage, his black Audi gleamed under the fluorescent lights. I walked up to it without really knowing why, maybe to feel the residual heat of the engine. Tangible proof that he had been there, that his rush had been real. The driver's side door wasn't fully closed. Daniel, always so meticulous, must have been distracted. Inside, the smell of his cologne was even stronger. On the passenger seat, half hidden under the car manual, I saw a small rectangular piece of paper. I picked it up. It was a receipt from the bar at the Drake Hotel, 2 coffees, a mineral water, and a club sandwich. Date last night. Time 10:47 p.m. Paid with a credit card. Daniel's. I stood completely still, holding that scrap of paper that suddenly weighed a ton. There could be 1,000 explanations. A last-minute meeting near the hotel, an out-of-town client. But something, a deep icy instinct, whispered to me that none of those explanations were the truth. The Drake wasn't close to his office, and at 11 p.m., a club sandwich for 2 wasn't a business dinner. It was a late-night snack for someone who had other intentions. I tucked the receipt into my purse. I didn't cry. I just went up to our silent penthouse, and that night, for the first time, I slept in the guest bedroom. The following days were an exercise in morbid observation. I started noticing things, the faint sweet smell of a strange perfume on the jacket he'd times left, draped over a chair, his exaggerated reaction when one night, while watching a show, his phone rang and he flipped it face down with a slap, claiming it was an annoying client. The way he changed his laptop password after years of using the same one, our anniversary date. The final blow came from where I least expected it. A college friend, Paige, who worked at a consulting firm. We met up for craft cocktails at a rooftop bar in Wicker Park. After chatting about work, mutual friends, and life, she played with the olive in her glass and said with an apparent casualness that didn't fool me, "Hey, I saw you the other day. Or rather, I saw Daniel." My heart skipped a beat. "Oh really? Where?" "At that trendy new spot on the Riverwalk. He was with a group from the firm, I think, and a tall brunette in a red dress. They looked like they were having a great time." She looked at me, and in her eyes, I saw the same concern Sarah had shown at the wedding. I don't know. They seemed close. But hey, I'm sure it was just a work thing, right? Sure, it was just a work thing. The same phrase, the same mantra. I nodded, my throat bone dry. Yeah, for sure, those team dinners. But in my head, the pieces were starting to snap together in a way that terrified me. The hotel's receipt, the late nights, the perfume, the girl in red, and a name I had heard Daniel mentioned on rare occasions, always with a special, professionally interested tone, Chloe Miller. That night, while Daniel snored softly beside me, he had come home at a reasonable hour. Smelling of pasta and red wine, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The doubt, that silent snake, no longer just nested in my stomach. It had coiled around my heart and was squeezing tight. It was no longer enough to observe. It was no longer enough to wait for the lie to crumble on its own. The naive Eleanor, the one who believed in business dinners, had been left behind somewhere between the receipt from the Drake and Paige's pitying gaze. Something snapped inside me. Resignation, perhaps, or maybe the exact opposite, the last vestige of resignation shattering into a million pieces. The coldness I would feel months later in the hotel parking garage began to form. Then that night, in the bed I shared with a man who felt more like a stranger every day. The next morning, after listening to Daniel leave the house with another late tonight, my love, I didn't stand staring out the window. I went to my laptop, opened the browser, and with fingers that trembled slightly, but with a newly forged steely determination, I typed the words, "Private Investigators Chicago." Sunday smelled of roasting meat and guilt. The aroma of the Sunday pot roast my mother was taking out of the oven in her Evanston home, mixed with the familiar scent of pine from the yard and something denser, heavier, the silent expectation that had blanketed the meal since I arrived alone. "Daniel is working on a Sunday again," my mother had asked when I walked in, kissing her cheek that smelled of lavender soap and worry, that endless case. My mother, Martha, nodded with tight lips, a gesture I knew too well. It was her way of saying, "I don't believe a word of it, but I won't push for now." My dad, Edward, reading from his armchair, only glanced up over his glasses and grunted, "That boy works like a dog. Someday he'll have the money to buy his own islands, but no time to step foot on it." It was my sister Sarah, already sitting at the dining table with a glass of red wine, who shot me the look that said it all. A look that said, "Are you okay? Do you want to talk? Because if that bastard did something to you, I will tear him apart." The meal went by with the usual cacophony of an American family Sunday. My younger brother Paul's kids ran circles around the table. My sister-in-law, Anna, talked non-stop about the PTA drama at their school. My dad pontificated about local politics. My mother served generous portions as if gravy could cover up any awkward silences, but the tension floated in the air, more tangible than the steam from the roast. It was during dessert. A homemade cherry pie my mother brought from the kitchen when the bomb dropped, albeit in the most subtle way. "Hey, Nora," my mother said, wiping her hands on her apron. "The other day I ran into Linda, the mother of Daniel's friend. What's his name? Mark. Anyway, I ran into Linda at Nordstrom. She told me she saw Daniel a couple of weeks ago on a Saturday afternoon at the Music Box Theater with some friends. She left the sentence hanging in the air like a dirty tray no one wants to pick up. Everyone, even the kids, seemed to go quiet for a second. Sarah put her fork down on her plate with a sharp clink. "Oh, really?" I asked, tasting a bite of pie that suddenly tasted like ash. "He didn't mention it to me." "Which friends?" "She didn't say," my mother replied, avoiding my eyes as she gathered plates. "Just mentioned he was with a younger crowd. I figured maybe you guys were organizing something and forgot to invite us old folks." Her laugh sounded forced, grating. "Daniel has a lot of obligations, Mom." I said my voice sounded too cold, too controlled. "Work stuff. You know how it is." My dad chimed in, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Work comes first. That's how it should be. Pass the wine, Edward." But my mother wasn't willing to let the opportunity slip while she was helping Anna carry plates into the kitchen. She said to me in a tone that pretended to be light, but was anything but, "Eleanor, honey, come help me with the coffee. You make it better than I do." It was a trap, and I, like an idiot, got up and followed her. In the kitchen, with the hum of the coffee maker as the only witness, the disguise fell away. My mother leaned against the marble counter, crossed her arms, and looked right at me. "What is going on, honey?" "Nothing, Mom. I told you, don't lie to me. You've looked like you're attending a funeral for weeks, and today you showed up alone again. Is it that Chloe girl Sarah told me about?" I mentally cursed my sister. Even though I knew her intentions were good, Sarah needs to mind her own business. Sarah minds your business because what else is a sister for? And I am your mother. Now tell me who this woman is. The exhaustion, the pent-up rage, the suspicion that had been eating me alive from the inside out for weeks. It all erupted in a harsh whisper. "She's the daughter of Harrison Miller, Daniel's senior partner, the newest hirer at his firm. She's 28 years old and apparently she likes indie movies and in expensive hotels." My mother's face fell. She didn't look surprised, but resigned, as if she had been waiting for this news, dreading it, but knowing it would eventually arrive. "Oh, Eleanor," she whispered, and suddenly she looked every bit her 65 years. "These men always the same." "No, Mom, not all men are the same, and this isn't just boys being boys. This is my husband lying to me, going out with someone else, making a fool out of me." "Are you sure?" she asked, and in her voice there was a pathetic shred of hope. "It could be a misunderstanding. Sometimes young women are very friendly and men get ideas." "I'm not stupid," I snapped, and my voice rose, making Anna, who is walking in with more plates, jump and quickly back out of the kitchen. "I have proof." "Well, almost. I'm making sure." My mother stepped forward, placing her wrinkled hands over mine, which were gripping the edge of the counter like a life preserver. "Listen to me, honey. Even if it were true, these things happen. They happen more often than you think. Your father," she paused, swallowing hard. "Well, that doesn't matter right now. What matters is the family, what you've built. 7 years, Eleanor. A beautiful penthouse, an enviable life. Are you going to throw it all away over a little fling?" I stared at her in disbelief, not because of what she said, but because of the deep ancient pain that surfaced in her eyes. Suddenly, many things from my childhood made a bitter kind of sense. The hushed arguments, my dad's sudden absences, the sadness that sometimes wrapped around my mother like a shawl. "Dad?" I asked, although I already knew the answer. She looked away. "It was a long time ago, a secretary. Something stupid. But I endured it. For you kids, for this house, for the family, and look, here we are together. Your father is a good man. In the end, they all have their weaknesses." I felt a wave of nausea, not disgust but panic. Was this my future? To endure, to lower my head, to turn into this strong, broken woman looking at me with pleading eyes? "I am not you, Mom," I said, and my voice trembled but didn't break. "I'm not going to endure it. I'm not going to pretend nothing is happening while my husband sleeps with someone else. I'm not going to keep up appearances so the neighbors won't talk. It's your life you're going to destroy." Her voice cracked too, but with anger. "Do you know what it is to be a divorced woman at your age? Moving back in with your parents, the looks of pity, your finances in a mess, and if you want to have kids, the clock is ticking." Every word was a knife, but every knife, instead of weakening me, was sharpening me. I'd prefer the pity of others over despising myself, I said, pulling my hands away from hers. And I'm not moving back into this house. I have my career, I have my savings, I have Sarah. Sarah, my mother exclaimed, as if my sister's name were an insult. Right, your sister, the feminist, the one who lives with her girlfriend and paints pictures nobody buys. She is going to give you marriage advice. Of course, a woman who couldn't even keep a man by her side. The kitchen door swung open. Zara stood there, fists clenched, her eyes blazing with fury. She had heard everything. A woman doesn't have to keep a man by her side, Mom. As if he were a dog or a houseplant, she said with a calm, more terrifying than any scream. And for your information, Emily and I have been together for 12 years, longer than many marriages we know. And we don't cheat on each other. That seems to be more than can be said for this household. My mother went pale. Don't speak like that. This is my house and Eleanor is your sister and she's hurting. And instead of supporting her, you're telling her to shut up and take it like you did. Well, no, she isn't you, she has more courage. The sound of a plate shattering on the dining room floor startled all three of us. It was my father. He had poked his head into the kitchen, and on his face, usually so serene, was a mix of shame and suppressed rage. You're all talking about things that are none of your business. He roared at my mother. Leave her alone, Martha. Eleanor is an adult. Let her do what she needs to do. And what would you know? My mother shot back, turning on him with a fury she must have been storing up for decades. You who were never there. You who? Enough. My voice sliced through the air like broken glass. Everyone went silent and looked at me. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with air heavy with family resentment, old secrets, and inherited lies. Enough, I repeated. Mom, I love you, but I am not going to live my life the way you lived yours. Dad, I have no words for you right now. Sarah, thank you. I grabbed my purse from the hook. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. I'm leaving and I'm not going to talk about this with you until I decide how and when. Daniel and I have things to figure out, and we are going to figure them out. Without family committees, without unsolicited advice, and without pot roasts to cover up the problems, I walked toward the door. Nobody tried to stop me. At the threshold, I turned around. My mother was crying silently. My father was looking at the floor, defeated. Only Sarah held my gaze, and in her eyes I saw a fierce pride, absolute solidarity. One more thing, Mom, I said. It's not a little fling, it's the end of my marriage, and I am going to be the one who decides how it ends. I walked out into the foyer, then out into the street, bathed in the Sunday afternoon light. The air was sweet, clean. It no longer smelled of roasting meat and guilt. It smelled of freedom, a terrifying, painful freedom, but freedom nonetheless. In my purse, my phone vibrated. It was a text from Daniel. Finishing up soon. Let's grab dinner. I miss you. I looked at the screen, that bright, easy lie. And for the first time, I didn't feel pain. I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. I didn't answer. I put the phone away, got into my car, and before starting the engine, I pulled out my planner. I searched for the number I had written down days earlier. After my online research, the number of the private investigator, recommended by a friend from law school, who specialized in messy divorces. I looked at the name Michael Rossi. Discreet investigations. Without leaving time for doubt or the ghost of my mother's resignation to deter me, I dialed the number. It rang twice before a deep professional voice answered. Rossi. Good afternoon, I said, my voice sounding strangely serene in the quiet of my car. This is Eleanor Bennett. I need your services. Michael Rossi's office smelled of cheap coffee and vanilla-flavored vape smoke. It wasn't in the glamorous part of Chicago, but in a 1970s building in Wrigleyville, just blocks from Wrigley Field. The waiting room was small with a Formica table and outdated auto magazines. Nothing like the pristine glass and steel offices of Daniel's law firm. Mrs. Bennett, go on in, the receptionist said, a middle-aged woman with reading glasses hanging from a chain. Michael Rossi looked nothing like a movie detective. He was a man in his 50s with thinning hair and a slight belly straining the buttons of his plaid shirt. He had a brown corduroy jacket draped over the back of his chair. His handshake was firm, dry. Have a seat, please. He pointed to the chair across from his desk, which was cluttered with folders and a dated laptop on the phone. You said this was a matrimonial surveillance matter. Yes. I nodded, placing my purse on my knees like a shield. Now that I was there in this place that confirmed my marriage required a spy, reality hit me with full force. I swallowed hard. I believe my husband is being unfaithful. I need proof. Rossi nodded without showing surprise or judgment. His expression was professional, neutral. He opened a notebook. I understand. It's a difficult situation. Tell me, what makes you suspicious? And so, with a voice that started off shaking, but grew firmer the more I spoke, I told him everything. The endless business dinners, the receipt from the Drake, the foreign perfume, the girl in red, the name, Chloe Miller, the senior partner's daughter. Rossi took notes in rapid, tiny handwriting. Do you have a photo of your husband and of Miss Miller? If you have one, I handed him my phone. I had a recent photo of Daniel from a family dinner. For Chloe, I had only found a LinkedIn profile picture that I had screenshotted. It was a professional headshot, a brunette, attractive with a confident, almost defiant smile. Rossi studied it. I know her, or rather I know of her. Her father, Harrison Miller, is a heavy hitter. He has interests all over Chicago. He looked at me. This could complicate things. People with power tend to be careful. I don't want trouble. I just want the truth. The truth has a price, Mrs. Miller, and sometimes that price isn't just financial. He put down his pen. Here are my rates. He slid a printed brochure toward me. Basic surveillance, weekly reports, photographic or video evidence if it's possible and legal. Everything's strictly confidential. You sign an NDA, I deliver results. If we're talking tapping computers or phones, that's another service. More expensive and with legal risks. I don't recommend it as a first step. I read the numbers. They were steep, but not prohibitive. I could afford it with my savings, with the portion of the joint account I managed. Money I had thought about using to remodel the kitchen would now be used to dynamite the foundation of my marriage. All right, just surveillance for now. I signed the paperwork he slid across the desk with what I hoped was steady handwriting. I want to know where he goes, who he is with, how much time he spends with her, everything. You'll have your first report in 48 hours. He stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. A piece of advice, Mrs. Miller. While the investigation is off, we act completely normal. No questions, no snooping, no blow-ups. Be cold, be smart. People who have something to hide get careless when they think nobody is watching. I walked out of there feeling dirty and powerful all at once. I had crossed a threshold. I was no longer just the suspicious wife. I was the client paying for the truth. The following 2 weeks were an exercise in non-stop acting. I smiled at Daniel in the mornings. I asked him about his day, about the Vanderbilt case. I nodded when he spun his increasingly elaborate lies. A dinner with Japanese clients at Alania, a firm team-building weekend in Lake Geneva. I mentally noted every detail, every contradiction, and then compared them with the concise, devastating reports that began arriving in a secure email account I had created just for this subject. Daniel Miller, Day 1 Thursday, exits law firm at 7:45 p.m., takes a taxi to Bouquet Restaurant, meets Miss Chloe Miller, 28 years old, ID attached at 8:15 p.m. Dinner lasts approximately 2 hours. Observable behavior, frequent physical closeness, laughter, holding hands at the table. Exit together at 10:30 p.m., take taxi headed north toward the Gold Coast. Exit on Astor Street, enter residential building. Subject exits alone at 12:47 a.m., takes taxi to primary residence. 12 photographs attached. The images were grainy, taken with a telephoto lens from afar, but unmistakable. Daniel smiling, leaning in toward her in an intimate gesture he hadn't used with me in years. Her laughing, touching his arm, the Astor Street address. A quick internet search confirmed it was a luxury rental building, their love nest, or perhaps the apartment he was paying for. The second report was even more damning. Day 6, Tuesday. Subject exits work 6 p.m., drives personal vehicle Audi A6 to Water Tower Place, meets Miss Miller in the underground structure. She enters vehicle, remain inside for 25 minutes, Subsequently, drive to the Monarch Hotel, enter separately 5 minutes apart. Subject exits at 10:15 p.m. alone. 8 photographs attached plus video excerpt, no audio of hotel entrance. The short, shaky video was the hardest blow. Seeing him, my husband walking into that hotel with that furtive determination, was like taking a punch to the gut. There was no more room for doubt or hope. The truth was that cold, irrefutable sequence of pixels. Michael Rossi called me with the third report. "Mrs. Miller, I have some additional information you might find interesting. We ran a basic financial trace using public data. Your husband has been making monthly transfers from a secondary account in his name to a lease agreement under Chloe Miller's name. The address is the one on Astor Street. The apartment has been leased for 7 months. 7 months, almost a year. It wasn't a slip-up, it was a double life. There are also records of purchases on his corporate credit card at jewelers and boutiques that, based on the amounts and frequency, don't seem meant for you." His neutral voice continued on the other end of the line. "Would you like us to dig deeper? We can try to access more detailed bank statements, but I would need your written authorization, and it carries more legal risk." "No," I said, and my voice sounded strangely serene, as if it were coming from far away. "This is enough. More than enough. Send me everything you have, please, and prepare the final invoice." I hung up. I didn't need anything else. I had the pieces of the puzzle, an ugly, vulgar puzzle that showed the picture of a rotting marriage. That same afternoon, when I knew Daniel would be in meetings late, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to the office of Olivia Vance, family law attorney. The same tiger Daniel had aggressively recommended the year before when I had issues with our HOA. The irony was so acidic I could almost taste it. "Olivia, it's Eleanor Miller. I need to see you. It's urgent and it's about Daniel." There was a brief silence on the other end. Then, the direct professional voice of the lawyer. "Come by tomorrow, first thing 8 a.m. through the back door if you prefer discretion." The second call was to the bank, to my wealth manager's private line. "Kevin, it's Eleanor. I need you to immediately freeze all the joint accounts, the savings and the line of credit. Only keep my personal account active." "Yes. It's an order from a joint account holder." "No, my husband is not available right now. It is a preventive security measure. I will explain everything in person soon." "Yes, right now, please." I hung up. My hands weren't shaking. My heart was beating at a rapid but steady rhythm. There was no more fear. There was only a cold, metallic determination. I had moved from suspicion to evidence and from evidence to action. That night, Daniel got home near midnight. He smelled of night air and a faint, sweet perfume that wasn't mine. He faked exhaustion. A disaster, babe. These Japanese executives are relentless. "What did you do tonight?" I was sitting on the sofa with an open book on my lap. The lights were low. I looked up and looked at him truly, maybe for the first time in months. I saw the tiny, almost imperceptible smudge of lipstick on the collar of his white shirt. I saw the slight puffiness under his eyes, not from exhaustion, but from the contained euphoria of a man who had just been with his mistress. I saw the stranger living in my house. "Oh, nothing important," I said, clear's throat, and smiled. It was a calm smile, the smile of someone who has already made an irreversible decision. Just house stuff. The calm I had felt after freezing the accounts and meeting with the lawyer lasted exactly 48 hours. It was a strange electric calm, like the silence that precedes a storm. I played my part. I made dinner, asked about his day, listened to his increasingly elaborate lies with a perfectly molded plastic smile. It was like living inside a glass bubble, watching the outside world distort, knowing that at any moment it could shatter. The explosion happened on a Tuesday afternoon, while I was folding freshly ironed laundry in the bedroom. My phone, tossed on the bed, buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. An area code from New York. An instinctive chill ran down my spine before I even swiped to accept the call. "Yes, hello," I said, my voice neutral. "Eleanor Miller." The voice on the other end was female, young, self-assured, and educated accents, the kind learned in expensive prep schools and polished abroad, speaking. "Who is this?" "It's Chloe Miller." The air rushed out of my lungs. I looked around as if the room, our bedroom, could offer me some kind of refuge. It couldn't. There were only stacks of Daniel's shirts, his carefully folded pants, the watch I bought him for our last anniversary sitting on the nightstand. An entire life packaged in domestic routines that suddenly seemed grotesque. Chloe Miller, I repeated, and I was surprised by how calm I sounded. The coldness I had been cultivating like a weapon activated instantly. Harrison Miller's daughter, the newest addition to my husband's law firm. There was a brief pause, as if she hadn't expected me to identify her so quickly. Exactly. It's about Daniel, she said quickly before I could hang up. And about us? There it was. The word us, a tiny word containing a whole universe of betrayal. I grabbed it like grabbing a knife by the blade, feeling the edge slice into me. Us? I asked, letting a thread of ice slip into my tone. You and Daniel form an us? How endearing. It must be complicated with him living here. And you? Well, where do you live exactly? In the apartment on Astor Street, the one he pays for, right? The silence on the line was absolute. I could almost hear her swallow hard, compose herself. She wasn't as confident as she seemed. Have you been following me? She asked, and her voice lost a fraction of its initial bravado. There's no need to follow someone who doesn't hide. I lied, relishing her confusion. Then I remembered. Suddenly, my index finger moved on its own. I tapped the screen and hit the call record button. A tiny red icon started flashing. Olivia Vance had suggested it. Record everything, even the silences. But tell me, Chloe, what is so urgent that you needed to call your lover's wife? I'm not his lover, she shot back, regaining some of her arrogance. We are something more. It's complicated. Of course, complicated. Like your dinner at Boca, or your afternoon at the Music Box Theater, or your stays at the Monarch Hotel. The truth sounds pretty straightforward to me. This isn't a joke, Eleanor. What we have is serious. Daniel and I are in love. The word love hit me in the solar plexus with the force of a fist, but I didn't double over. Instead, I stood up straighter. The folded laundry fell to my feet, ignored. In love, I repeated, letting out a dry, cutting laugh. How beautiful. And when did this romance begin? 7 months ago? When he rented the apartment for you, or before? When he snuck you into Daddy's firm to keep you closer? He didn't sneak me in. She exploded, and for the first time, I heard genuine anger in her voice. I have a master's from Harvard, I earned my spot, and how lucky that your dad is the senior partner, and what a coincidence that your direct supervisor is Daniel, and that you need so many private meetings to review contracts. It must be a very absorbing job. You are just bitter. You can't keep him by your side if he doesn't love you anymore. Her tone turned mocking. Don't you see it? He stayed with you out of pity, out of habit. I give him something you never could. The burn of rage climbed my throat, but I swallowed it down. No, I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. Instead, I lowered my voice, making it almost confidential, sweetly venomous. And what do you give him, Chloe? Youth. A last name that opens doors. Why don't you tell me, when you're in that apartment he pays for? Does he talk about how boring I am? About how grateful he is that you came into his life? Or does he talk about the mortgage, the tedious family obligations, how stressful it is to fake it day after day? She took a deep breath. You have no idea. I have every idea. I have photos. I have receipts. I have bank statements. I have the reports from a private investigator who has been following you for weeks. I know everything, Chloe, down to the brand of perfume you wear, the wine you order at Boca. I know absolutely everything. The silence this time was different. It was a silence loaded with panic. I could feel it through the line. No, you can't prove that my husband is using marital funds to bankroll his younger mistress, who happens to be his boss's daughter, compromising not just our marriage, but the firm's ethics. Of course I can and I will. He loves me, she said, but her voice sounded weak like a scolded child. Daniel only loves himself. Chloe, you are an accessory. An expensive and perhaps fun one, but an accessory nonetheless. When this blows up, and it is going to blow up, Daddy is not going to be very happy, and Daniel will have to choose. Would you bet he'll choose me? Before she could answer, I delivered my final blow. The one I had been preparing since I saw her LinkedIn profile, since I found out who she was. By the way, did you know that this weekend, According to his shared calendar, Daniel and I were supposed to go to Lisbon to celebrate our anniversary. He's been talking about it for weeks, the hotel, the restaurants. He seemed very excited. It was a lie. There were no plans for Lisbon. He hadn't spoken of anniversaries in months, but it was the kind of intimate, cruel detail that could pierce the armor of a mistress who thought she was the protagonist of a great romance. There was a gasp, a small choked sound, then nothing. "He didn't mention it to you," I added with fake sweetness. "How strange. He must have forgotten, being so busy with work and all." I hung up. My hands were shaking now from adrenaline, from suppressed rage, from a kind of wild, painful triumph. The recording was saved. I had caught her. I had driven the knife of doubt into her rich girl confidence, but the victory tasted like ash. Not even 10 minutes passed before the phone rang again. This time it was Daniel. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th I picked up. I didn't say a word. "Eleanor." His voice was tense, agitated. "What did you say to Chloe? She just called me throwing a fit." "Hello, honey," I said with a calm that must have sounded ghostly to him. "How was your day?" "Lots of work." "Don't screw with me. Did you threaten her? Did you tell her you're having her watched?" "We just had a woman-to-woman chat. She called me, to tell me how deeply in love you two are." It was very enlightening. I heard him breathing hard on the other end. I pictured him in his office, his tie loosened, glancing at the door, terrified someone might hear. "She's just a kid, Eleanor. She's confused. She mistook professional attention for something else. It doesn't mean anything. 7 months of rent, 3-star Michelin dinners, and afternoons at the Monarch are professional attention. Wow. My firm's client entertainment budget is much tighter." The silence was absolute. Then a hoarse whisper filled with a fear I had never heard from him before. "What? What do you know?" "Everything, Daniel. I know everything. And I have the proof on paper digitally and recorded like the conversation I just had with your confused kid." "Are you insane?" he yelled. But the yell sounded desperate, lacking any real force. "You hired a detective. You're spying on me, watching you." "There's a difference. I was monitoring my marital assets, which turned out to be invested in an apartment for your mistress and in jewelry and in trips. It's amazing how many business expenses don't have receipts." "Honey, she's my partner's daughter," he shrieked. "It's complicated. If her dad finds out that there's friction, he could. He could what? Fire you? Leave his spoiled little girl without her new toy?" I cut him off sharply. I had had enough. "Listen to me, listen well. I have frozen all our joint accounts. I have retained Olivia Vance. The divorce papers are being drafted right now. And if you do not sign an uncontested divorce and accept the division of assets she proposes, everything I have, including that recording of Chloe admitting to your affair, will end up not just in court, but in Harrison Miller's email inbox, the Bar Association's, your mother's, and the Chicago Tribune if necessary. No, you can't do that." His voice was a thread now, a plea. "Of course I can and I will unless you do exactly what I say first thing. You come home right now and we are going to have a real conversation without lies, without crocodile tears, because I ran out of tears for you months ago." I hung up. I turned off my phone. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor amid the piles of folded laundry. My body was shaking from head to toe as if I had a fever, but inside, in some deep place, there was a core of perfect ice. Still and hard. I had said the words, "Divorce, lawyer proof." There was no turning back now. The war had begun, and I had just won the first decisive battle. I had stolen the initiative. I had stripped him of control. Now he was on the defensive, scared. And a scared man, I knew very well, is a dangerous man. But he is also Arnold's mistakes. I waited, sitting on the floor of our bedroom, surrounded by the wreckage of the life I had built and was about to demolish. I waited for my husband to arrive to face the man I had shared 7 years with, and whom, in that moment more than ever, I didn't know at all. The law firm of Miller Davis and Associates occupied 2 entire floors of a modern high-rise on Lazall Street, boasting spectacular views of the Chicago River. It had always seemed ironic to me. So much money, so much prestige dedicated to solving other people's problems while ours rotted from the inside. Today, as I walked through the enormous glass doors, that irony tasted like bile. The receptionist, a young, elegantly dressed woman, smiled professionally. "Good morning. Do you have an appointment with Eleanor Bennett to see my husband, Daniel Bennett?" I said without stopping. My heels clicked with determination against the polished marble floor of the lobby. I wore a simple but impeccable pearl gray pantsuit, my hair pulled back in a severe bun. I wasn't the disheveled wounded wife. I was a negotiator walking into a boardroom. Olivia Vance had told me, "Your appearance is your first statement. Let it project power, not pain." "Mrs. Miller, wait, you can't just go in." The receptionist stood up, alarmed. But I had already reached the heavy oak doors that led to the attorney's suites. "Relax, Lauren," I said, remembering her name from some firm holiday party. "My husband is expecting me." I pushed the doors open. My heart was pounding, but it was a firm, steady beat of pure adrenaline, not fear. The bullpen, with its designer desks and young associates typing frantically, fell into an uncomfortable silence. Some recognized me and lowered their eyes. Others, the newer ones, watched me with curiosity. Daniel's office was at the end of the hallway, his name engraved on a brass plaque. His secretary, Laura, a woman in her 50s who had always seemed nice enough, went pale when she saw me. "Eleanor, honey, Daniel is in. I know he's alone. I just spoke with him." I interrupted with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Laura, this is none of your business. Please don't put yourself in the middle." Compassion and conflict weared on her face. She nodded slowly and looked away. I appreciated her silence. I opened the office door without knocking. Daniel was standing by the window, his back to me, staring out at the chaos of the city streets. Hearing me, he spun around. He looked wrecked. He was wearing the same wrinkled shirt from the hotel parking garage that morning, his tie undone. He had deep bags under his eyes. His face was a mixture of anger, panic, and a shadow of something that might have been remorse. "What the hell are you doing here?" he hissed, lowering his voice, but failing to hide the tremor in it. "Are you trying to ruin me?" "You did that all by yourself?" I said, shutting the door behind me with a soft final click. I pulled a thick manila envelope from my leather tote and dropped it onto his immaculate oak desk. "The divorce papers, the proposed settlement agreement, everything is in there. Signed by me. Your turn." He stared at the envelope as if it contained a live snake. Then he glanced at the door, blindly imagining the eavesdropping ears on the other side. "Eleanor, for the love of God, we can talk about this at home. This isn't the place." "This is the perfect place," I said, sweeping my gaze over the shelves full of law books, the framed diplomas, the spot where our wedding photo used to sit, which I just noticed was gone. "This is where you built your lie, where you used your power, your influence to finance your double life. It seems only fair that it crumbles here." He stepped closer, resting his hands on the desk, leaning toward me. He tried to look intimidating, but he only managed to look desperate. "Listen to me, Chloe. It isn't what you think. She's unstable. She got obsessed with me. I tried to cut it off, but she threatened to go to her father to tell him I was harassing her. She could destroy my career, Eleanor." I was trapped. A bitter short laugh escaped my lips. "Seriously, that's the new version, because 2 days ago in the garage you told me it was work stuff. And last night she was a confused kid. Now she's a psychopath blackmailing you. How convenient, Daniel. Always the victim. Never the bastard who's sleeping with his boss's daughter. I will not allow you to shut up." I snapped, and my voice cold and sharp as glass rang through the room. He recoiled in shock. "You don't allow me anything. Not since I watched you walk into that hotel. I'm talking now. You have 2 options. You sign these papers. You accept the division of assets my lawyers is which, by the way, is very generous, considering we could go to criminal court for embezzlement, and this ends in a civilized manner. Or you force me to make all the information I have public. And I don't just mean to the judge. I mean to every single one of your partners, your clients, the financial press, prominent family lawyer caught in an embezzlement scandal with his partner's daughter. Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it?" The office door swung open violently. Harrison Miller, the senior partner, Chloe's father, A 60-year-old man with the posture of an old boxer and the gaze of a hawk filled the doorway. Next to him, pale as wax, but with eyes bloodshot with rage, stood Chloe. She must have come running. What the hell is going on here? Miller thundered. His eyes darted from Daniel, sweating and coming apart at the seams, to me, standing tall and cold in front of the desk, and finally to the manila envelope lying between us, like a declaration of war. Harrison, this isn't, Daniel started, but Miller cut him off with a wave of his hand. I heard shouting from my office, and my daughter has told me some very concerning things. His gaze locked onto me. It was a look that must have made judges and opposing counsel tremble. Eleanor, I am deeply sorry it has come to this. Daniel, if you have done anything to compromise this firm, I haven't done anything, Daniel shouted. But his voice was a panicked squeak. He's lying. Chloe's voice, shrill and full of furious tears, sliced through the air. She pointed a trembling finger at Daniel. You used me. You told me your marriage was a sham. That clears throat. You were just waiting for the right time to leave her. That I was the love of your life. It was all a lie. You are a coward and a liar. The spectacle was worthy of a soap opera. But I wasn't there for the drama. I was there for results. Mr. Miller, I said, addressing the senior partner with a calm that starkly contrasted with the hysteria of the other two. I apologize that you have to witness this unpleasant scene, but as you can see, your partner's personal situation is severely affecting the professional ethics, and I fear the finances of this firm. I picked up the envelope and held it out to him. This is my divorce petition. Inside, you will find detailed proof of irregular wire transfers Daniel has made from our joint accounts, destined largely, according to my investigator, to cover expenses related to his relationship with your daughter. Apartments, jewelry, vacations. Miller turned stark white. He took the envelope as if it were burning hot. Is this true, Daniel? His voice was now a dangerous low rumble. Harrison, she's exaggerating. It was to help her. Chloe had debts. You wouldn't. Don't use me as an excuse, you son of a, Chloe screamed. Her tears of fury had stopped flowing. Now there was only fierce, spurned hatred in her eyes. I spent my own money. Your money was just to buy me, to keep me quiet. You are pathetic. Daniel looked like a cornered animal, glancing from one person to another, looking for a way out that didn't exist. The facade of the successful lawyer, the man of the world, had completely collapsed, leaving behind a petty, terrified shell. Enough, Miller said, his authority filling the room. He looked at his daughter with a mix of disappointment and fury. Chloe, go to my office now. Then he turned back to me. Eleanor, I am truly sorry for what has happened. You have my word that this matter will be handled with the utmost seriousness internally. We do not tolerate conduct that compromises our reputation. I expect nothing less. I nodded. Because if appropriate measures aren't taken, I will be forced to make this information public. Not just for the sake of my divorce, but for the sake of any other women who might cross his path. I looked directly at Daniel, my lawyer, Miss Vance. I grabbed my purse. The circle was complete. I had planted the seed of doubt, of distrust, in the place that mattered most to Daniel, his work, his prestige. Harrison Miller would never look at him the same way again. And Chloe, the spurned lover, would be his fiercest enemy inside those very walls. As I walked out of the office, the silence in the bullpen was absolute. Every eye was glued to me. Some held pity, others admiration. Most were just purely morbid curiosity. I walked with my head held high, feeling the story spread like wildfire in my wake. Just as I reached the glass doors, I heard his footsteps running down the hall. Wait, it was Daniel. He had escaped his office. His face was flushed, his eyes pleading, Eleanor, please, I'm sorry, I'm truly sorry. Tell me what I have to do. Whatever it is, just don't destroy my life. I stopped. I turned around slowly. Every lawyer, paralegal, and secretary was holding their breath. This was the final scene, and I had written the script. Your life, Daniel, I said in a voice so clear everyone could hear it. You destroyed it yourself. The first time you lied to your wife. The second time you used our money to buy necklaces for someone else. That entire night you spent in a hotel room while I waited for you in a parking garage. I didn't do anything. I just got tired of waiting and I left. The glass doors closed behind me, sealing in the scandal, the shame, the disaster I had left in my wake. Out on the Lazel Street sidewalk, the midday sun was blindingly bright. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of traffic, of coffee, of the city. It didn't smell like lies. It didn't smell like cheap cologne and guilt. My phone vibrated, a text from Sarah. "All good. Do you need me to come over?" I smiled for the first time in a long while, a real tired but clean smile. I typed back, "It's done, let the show begin. See you at home. Bring wine, the expensive one." I looked up at the windows of the law firm. Up there, my old life was crumbling to dust, and down here on the street I was finally intact, breathing. The chilled white wine tasted like victory. A sour, exhausting victory, but a victory nonetheless. Sarah and I were in the living room of the penthouse, shoes kicked off on the floor, feet propped up on the coffee table. The late afternoon light spilled through the windows, bathing the remnants of my old life in a warm glow. Everything felt foreign to me now. The throw pillows we had picked out together, the framed photo of our honeymoon in Hawaii, the designer vase Daniel had paid a fortune for. They were all artifacts from a shipwreck. "I can't believe you dropped the papers right in the middle of the firm," Sarah said, shaking her head with an admiring grin. "You've got balls of steel." I didn't have a choice. I had to do it where it would hurt him the most, where it was real. If I had done it here, he would have found a way to spin it into just another domestic argument, another misunderstanding. There, in front of his entire world, there was no escape. Well, Harrison Miller is never going to forget that scene, neither is Chloe. "The idiot really built himself a nightmare," she said, taking a long sip. "So, what now, the boring legal part? I hope so. I hope it's boring fast and that it gives me half of everything that's mine, which is a lot." I sighed, setting my glass on the table. The worst is over right now. Everyone knows there are no more secrets to keep. The doorbell rang, a shrill, insistent sound. Sarah and I exchanged a look. "Are you expecting someone?" "Tell me it's not the press," Sarah joked. But she got up and checked the peephole. Her expression darkened instantly. "It's Mom." A knot formed in my stomach. I wasn't ready for another battle, especially not with her, but I knew it was inevitable. I opened the door. My mother, Martha, stood on the landing. She wore a light coat, even though it wasn't cold, and her purse was clutched tightly in her arms. Her face, normally so put together and serene, was pale. Her eyes slightly puffy, though she wasn't crying. She wore a determined expression, the same one she used to wear when she took me to the doctor for my childhood vaccines. "This will hurt, but it's necessary." "Mom, let me in, Eleanor." Her tone left no room for argument. I stepped aside. She walked in, saw Sarah, the wine glasses, the atmosphere of both mourning and celebration, and her mouth tightened further. "Sarah, I would like to speak to your sister alone. Whatever you have to say to me, you can say it in front of her." I interjected before Sarah could move. "There are no secrets here. Not anymore." My mother nodded bitterly. She perched on the edge of the sofa without taking off her coat, as if she didn't plan on staying long. I spoke with Daniel's mother. A heavy silence fell over the room. "I imagine," I said, crossing my arms, "she's devastated. She says you've destroyed her son, humiliated him publicly, ruined his career, that I did exactly what he deserved." I cut her off, feeling the anger I thought I'd exhausted flare up again. "And what did you tell her, Mom? That her little boy is a saint? That I'm hysterical?" I told her that I am so sorry. My mother looked at me, and for the first time I saw something more than disapproval in her eyes. I saw fear. "But I came here to talk about us, Eleanor. About this family. What you did today dragged our name through the mud. All of Chicago will be talking." Sarah let out a dry laugh. "For God's sake, Mom, now you're worried about what people will say. Her husband has been screwing his boss's daughter for almost a year. That doesn't drag our name. That doesn't give people something to talk about. You fix those things at home." My mother exploded, slamming her fist against the arm of the sofa. "You do not air dirty laundry in public. Never. You, Eleanor, broke the most important rule. You brought this scandal right to our front door." I stepped forward. I planted myself right in front of her. There was no more distance, no more difference, no more patience, Just two women of the same blood facing each other across an abyss of misunderstanding. Daniel brought the shame when he decided to cheat. You brought it when you told me to put up with it, to close my eyes like you did. All I've done is open them. And look, Mom, look around. Do you see anything here worth saving? This condo, this sofa, this life of lies. Family is worth saving, she screamed, and suddenly tears spilled out, furious and uncontrolled. Not being alone is worth it. Not having to start completely over at 40 is worth it. You don't know what's waiting for you, Eleanor. Loneliness is a cold, dark well, and once you fall in, you never get out. Her scream, loaded with an anguish so ancient and profound, froze Sarah and me in our tracks. It wasn't just my present we were arguing about. It was her past, her entire life. Why, Mom? I asked, my voice cracking. Why did you put up with it? For us? Because of what people would say or because you were afraid? She lowered her head, her shoulders shook. When she spoke again, her voice was a raw, torn whisper. For all of it, for you kids, for the house. To not disappoint my parents. Because that's what women of my generation did. We endured your father. It was once, just once with his secretary, a foolish 20-something, who believed he was going to leave me for her. She looked up, her eyes two wells of sorrow. When I found out, I wanted to kill him, and then I wanted to die myself. But then you were 10, Sarah was 12, Paul was 8. What was I going to do? Break the family, condemn you to grow up in a broken home, to be the divorce kids? No, I couldn't. So, I swallowed my pride, I swallowed my rage, and I forgave him. She wiped her face aggressively. But forgiveness, honey, forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's having to look the man who broke your trust in the eye every single morning and make him breakfast. It's swallowing your pride day after day so that everyone else can have a normal life. And now your father looks at me, and I still see that man. And he looks at me and sees the woman who forgave him but never absolved him. That is our life, Eleanor. Is that what you want? To put on a brave face until you forget who you really are. The weight of her confession hit me like a ton of bricks. Sarah had covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes brimming with tears. I felt the floor drop out from under me. My entire childhood, all those moments of silent tension in the house, my dad's absences, my mom's chronic sadness, it all made a terrible, heartbreaking sense. No, Mom, I said, and my voice was soft now, filled with shared pain. That isn't what I want. That's exactly why I can't do what you did. Because I admire you for your strength, for the sacrifice you made for us. But I don't want your life. I don't want your silence. I don't want to die a little bit every day. I prefer the loneliness you're talking about. I prefer the cold well over rotting away in a warm lie. She stared at me for a long time, the tears sliding down her wrinkled cheeks. Then, unexpectedly, her lips curved into a tiny sad smile. You are stronger than I am, Eleanor. You always were and braver, she sighed, a sigh that seemed to come from the deepest marrow of her bones. I told you to endure it because it was the only thing I knew how to do, because I thought I was saving you from pain. But I was just offering you a lifetime installment plan for my own pain. And I don't want that for you. She stood up with effort, slowly took off her coat and draped it over the back of the sofa, an intimate domestic gesture that meant she was staying, that she was laying down her arms. You're right. He brought the shame. You only brought the truth, and the truth hurts, but at least it doesn't poison. She walked over and put her hands on my shoulders. Her palms, rough and warm, transferred a new different kind of strength to me. Do what you have to do, honey, and count on me. Not to tell you what to do, but to support whatever you decide. This condo, she said, waving dismissively at the penthouse. These things are not your life. You are your life, and it is too valuable to waste on someone who doesn't know what he has. It was the greatest act of love my mother had shown me in years. Sarah came over and wrapped her arms around both of us, and the three of us cried in the middle of the living room of my failed marriage. We cried for the pain, for the lost time, for the battles that were never fought, and for the one I was finally fighting. The peace was short-lived. The next day, Daniel's mother, Teresa, showed up at my door. She wasn't devastated or pleading. She arrived with the wounded dignity of a mother defending her cub, but also with the practical intelligence of a woman of her social standing. "Eleanor, can we handle this another way?" she said, without bothering to sit down. "A temporary separation therapy. Daniel is a wreck. He knows he made a massive mistake." "It wasn't a mistake, Teresa. It was a choice. 1,000 choices every day for months, and therapy doesn't cure a lack of respect and disloyalty." She nodded bitterly. "He will give you whatever you ask for. The condo, generous alimony. But don't ruin his career. If you go to court with those proofs you claim to have, he won't just lose everything with you, he'll lose everything. And you don't want that. He's the father of the children you could have had." "We don't have children, and thank God for that," I said unflinchingly, "and I don't want to ruin his career. I just want what's mine, and I want to be away from him forever. Tell your son that if he signs the uncontested settlement agreement without a fight, his professional life might survive, even if he has to switch firms. That is my offer. The only one." Teresa looked at me, and in her eyes I saw that she understood. She knew she had lost. Her boy had no room left to maneuver. She nodded once and left without another word. That night, like a predictable echo, came Daniel's final attempt. It wasn't a phone call, it was him in person. At 1 a.m., knocking softly on the door. I looked through the peephole. He was unhinged, sporting a 3-day beard, smelling of whiskey and desperation. I opened the door but left the security chain latched. "Eleanor, please let me in. Let me explain. I've listened to you enough, Daniel. There's nothing new you can say." "I love you," he cried out, his voice cracking into a sob. "I realize that I love you. The thing with Chloe was stupid. A way to run away. I don't know, but you are my life. What we have, we can't throw it in the trash." I looked at him through the crack in the door, at this man who had once made me laugh, who I had dreamed of a future with, who I had sworn eternal love to. I didn't feel anything anymore. Not anger, not hatred, not love. Just a massive emptiness and a profound relief. "No, Daniel," I said, with absolute calm. "You don't love me. What you love is the life you had. The comfortable, respectable life with a wife who ironed your shirts and kept up appearances. What you want is for me to sweep your shame under the rug like a good wife would. But I am no longer that woman, and that life is over. You killed it. We can try," he begged, leaning his forehead against the wood of the door. "No, because I don't love you anymore. And you can't build anything on top of a hole. Go away, Daniel. Talk to your lawyer, sign the papers, and leave me alone. It's the only decent thing you can do for me in the end." I shut the door. I heard him slide down the other side until he was sitting on the landing. I heard an ugly, muffled sob, and then after a while, I heard his footsteps walking away, slower and slower until they disappeared. I leaned against the door on my side, on the side of my new life, empty, uncertain but clean. For the first time in a long, long time I felt at peace. The final bond, the bond of dead love, had been severed. All that was left was paper, ink, and the law, and I was ready. The courthouse smelled of waxed wood, fear, and bureaucracy. A stale odor that hadn't changed in decades. Eleanor, was sitting on a hard bench in the hearing room, flanked by Olivia Vance, whose presence beside me was as solid and reassuring as a battleship. Across from us at the other table sat Daniel and his attorney, a tired-looking man who hadn't stopped whispering to his client with evident frustration. Daniel barely looked at me. He looked thinner, consumed. He wore an expensive suit, but it hung loosely on him. His elegance had become a cheap imitation of itself. I, on the other hand, wore a simple navy blue dress. It wasn't the costume of a victim or an avenger. It was the uniform of someone who had come to close a business deal. "Your Honor," Daniel's lawyer began when the judge, a middle-aged woman with wire-rimmed glasses, called for opening statements. "My client wishes to express his deep remorse for the mistakes made, which in no way were meant to diminish the respect he holds for Mrs. Miller. However, we consider the proposed division of assets presented by the petitioner to be excessive. It does not reflect the spirit of cooperation my client has shown. Nor does it take into account his current professional situation, which has significantly deteriorated following these unfortunate events." Olivia leaned slightly toward the microphone. Her voice was clear, serene, without a trace of emotion. Your Honor, my client is not here to evaluate remorse, but to enforce her rights. The respondent's spirit of cooperation was limited to being caught red-handed after months of deception and the diversion of joint marital funds. The proposal is fair, and as for his professional situation, it stems directly from his own actions, not my client's actions, which, by the way, we have heavily documented. The judge leafed through the thick case file. I see the petitioner has provided an extensive evidentiary dossier. Any objections to its validity, Counselor? Daniel's lawyer swallowed hard. Your Honor, some of that evidence may have been obtained in a manner. All obtained legally and in full compliance with privacy laws, Olivia cut in, sliding a copy of the investigator's reports and certified bank statements across the table to the clerk. Photographs, professional surveillance reports, joint account statements showing recurring wire transfers to third-party accounts, and even an audio recording of a conversation in which the third party, Chloe Miller, admits to the relationship. No illegal wiretaps, just facts. Daniel grew even paler at hearing Chloe's name. His lawyer muttered something, but nodded in resignation. The judge examined the photos, one of them particularly clear. Daniel and Chloe walking into the hotel. She then moved to the bank statements, where the transfers to an account under Chloe Miller's name stood out with shameful regularity. Mr. Miller, the judge said, looking up over her glasses. Do you acknowledge these transfers? Daniel opened his mouth, but only a croak came out. Finally, he nodded. Yes, Your Honor, but they were loans to help her. Loans without a contract, without interest, and with no intention of repayment, as evidenced by the text messages also included in the file, Olivia noted seamlessly. Funds drawn from an account fed by the couple's shared life savings. The legal battle was brief and brutal. In a final burst of desperation, Daniel tried to argue that the Chicago penthouse was largely the fruit of his labor and that I should settle for less. That was when Olivia laid out her final documents. The contracts from my interior design business, my pay stubs, the records proving that I had contributed as much or more to the mortgage and living expenses for years, especially in the beginning when he was just a junior associate drowning in law school debt. My client sacrificed professional opportunities to support her husband's career, Your Honor, Olivia said. And, for the first time, her tone held a hint of restrained emotion. She built a home, and that home was betrayed. All she is asking for now is her rightful share. Not a penny more, not a penny less. The judge deliberated briefly, consulting her notes. The courtroom was oppressively silent. I looked down at my hands clasped in my lap. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt an immense exhaustion and a deep yearning for it to be over. Reviewing the history and the evidence provided, the judge finally declared, and finding no cause to justify a disproportionate split, I find the settlement agreement proposed by Eleanor Miller to be fair and according to law approved under the requested terms. 50% division of assets, spousal maintenance granted, given the current disparity in income as requested. Clears throat custody of the shared pet, a cat named Wright, goes to Eleanor. She closed the folder with a sharp thack. I wish both parties peace as they move forward. Case closed. A bang of the gavel, and it was over. 7 years of my life reduced to a few minutes of legal jargon and property distribution. Olivia squeezed my arm, smiling with professional satisfaction. Across the aisle, Daniel's lawyer was talking to him in a low voice, packing up his briefcase. Daniel wasn't moving. He was staring at me with bloodshot eyes, a mix of disbelief and hatred. I walked out of the courtroom without looking back. Out in the hallway, cool and quiet, I took a deep breath. Olivia handed me a certified copy of the judgment. It's done, Eleanor. You are free and financially secure. You won. I didn't win anything that wasn't already mine, I said, putting the document in my tote bag. But thank you, Olivia, for everything. As I was walking down the courthouse steps, the mid-morning sun blindingly bright, Daniel caught up to me. Eleanor, wait, please. I stopped. I didn't say anything, so. This is how it all ends with a division of bank accounts and a cat. His voice was raspy, broken. It ended months ago, Daniel, in a parking garage. Today was just paperwork. He lowered his head. I don't hate you, you know, even though you hate me. No, I said, and the truth of my own words surprised me. I don't hate you. Hate requires energy, and I spent all I had left on you. What I feel is nothing. You are a stranger, and I want you to stay that way. For the first time, I saw how that indifference, harder than any insult, hit him harder than the judge's ruling. He swayed slightly. I loved you. Really, maybe. But it wasn't enough, and I don't love you anymore. It's that simple and that sad. Goodbye, Daniel. I walked down the rest of the steps without turning my head. I didn't hear his footsteps. I didn't hear anything else, just the noise of the city, vast and indifferent, keeping its spin. My old life was left behind in that dark room, and I was walking step by step toward whatever came next. 1 year later, the storefront smelled of fresh paint, white lies, and champagne. Sis, that's what the elegant neon sign on the exposed brick wall read. Beneath it, Sarah and I in our best dresses were welcoming friends, family, and clients. It was the grand opening of our interior design studio. A chunk of my divorce settlement, plus a small business loan, had paid for this. A modest but charming space in Wicker Park, brand new computers, fabric swatches, and a massive sofa where clients could sit and dream up their homes. Real homes, not showrooms. The place was packed. My parents were there. My mother, Martha, holding a glass of champagne, was chatting animatedly with an old client of mine. She caught my eye and winked. There was something new about her, a lightness, as if by supporting me unconditionally, she had finally begun to forgive herself. My father, Edward, stood beside her, quiet, but with his hand resting on the small of her back. A small, timid gesture that was perhaps the beginning of something different. Or maybe just the truce of two war veterans, my work friends, my old college roommates, even a few clients who had followed me. They were all there. There was no trace of pity in their eyes, only curiosity, admiration, and genuine joy. Are you nervous? Sarah asked, stepping up beside me with a bottle of champagne to refill my glass. A little, but it's a good nervous. The nerves of someone starting something that belongs to them, completely to them. Hell yeah. She nodded, clinking her glass against mine. Then Sarah tapped her glass with a spoon to get everyone's attention. The chatter died down. All right, thank you all for coming. For those who don't know, this has been a dream my little sister and I have shared for years. And, look, sometimes the endings that feel catastrophic are just the beginnings we've needed all along. She looked at me, her eyes shining. Eleanor isn't just the best designer I know, she's the bravest person I know. And tonight, I toast to her, to us, and to all new beginnings. Cheers, cheers. The crowd echoed, and the sound of clinking glasses filled the room. In that moment, through the crowd, I spotted Michael Rossi, the private investigator. He was standing near the door with a beer in his hand, watching the scene with an almost imperceptible smile. Our eyes met. He gave me a slight nod. A greeting from a professional to a satisfied client, or perhaps from one person to another who had made it out of a dark tunnel. I nodded back. He turned around and slipped out the door, his job done, his discreet but permanent mark left on my life. Later, as the party started winding down, I stepped out the front door of the studio. The Chicago night was warm, pulsing with life. In the pocket of my dress, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. I opened it cautiously. It's Chloe. I know you don't have to answer. I just wanted to tell you that I moved to London and that you were right. It wasn't love, it was something else, and it cost me dearly. I hope you are doing well and that you get lots of clients. Goodbye. I read it twice. Then I deleted the message. It wasn't out of spite. It was just that her chapter and Daniel's belonged to a book I had already closed. I didn't need epilogues for its characters. Sarah stepped outside and leaned against the doorframe next to me. Everything okay? Yeah, I said, and it was true. Everything was okay. I looked up. Between the brick buildings of Wicker Park, I could see a patch of starry sky. It wasn't a dawn like that one in the hotel parking garage. It was a full, serene, conquered night. I had lost a marriage. I had gained a stronger sisterhood, a craft I loved, a piece of peace, and the hard, wonderful right to write my own story without lies, without compromises, without anyone by my side who didn't want to be there for me, and only for me. Come on, Sarah said, tugging gently on my arm. There's still champagne left, and our first client comes in tomorrow at 9 a.m. Life goes on, sis. I followed her inside, back to the warmth of the people who loved me, to the glow of the neon lights of our very own business. Life indeed went on, and for the first time in a very, very long time I actually wanted to live.